Welcome to the Triage Method Podcast Q&A edition with me, Gary McGowan, and my co-host, Mr. Patrick Farrell. How are you this week, Paddy?
I'm positively fantastic since people last heard me on Monday.
10 minutes ago. Brilliant. Unreal. Um, so this week's question is both specific and general. It's the question is, my elbow clicks when doing pressing movements. What should I do? Do I need to change anything? Is it bad? But also just generally like, all right, my elbow, my shoulder, my knee, my hip clicks when doing movements. Is that a bad thing? And the answer to this is like, short answer is no. The long answer is maybe. So basically, like there's many different reasons that a joint could feel like it is clicking or crunching, popping or whatever. And the main time I become concerned about that or really think about making changes to something is if it's one causing someone pain. So there's pain with the click, or a joint is locking or something like that. Like that can be a problem. That's something that maybe warrants further investigation, especially if it's like significantly limiting your function. Like sometimes, for example, if you tear a meniscus in your knee, you can get like catching and locking of the joint at certain movements. So that might warrant further investigation. But a lot of the time what people are actually asking here is like, all right, I'm doing some pressing, my elbow just kind of clicks at the top. It's not painful, but should I be worried about that? And I think in general, no. Sometimes what can happen, I saw someone ask this somewhere, I can't remember where it was, someone's Instagram Q&A or something. Someone was asking, my hip clicks when I come down at the bottom of a leg raise movement, for example. That happens with me too. And basically, like what you're looking at in a lot of cases is maybe a tendon is moving over the side of another tendon or over the side of a bone. And there's just a clicking as that movement happens. It can kind of happen with certain muscles with longer tendons, depending on where they are, or different like connective tissue sheaths and stuff. And I think if you begin to study anatomy, like looking at cadaver images and things like that, actual dead bodies, like you actually see anatomy in real life, it becomes easy to kind of brush the stuff aside, because you're like, wow, it's amazing that all this actually works. There's so much stuff cramped into small spaces, things overlapping each other, running beside each other, etc. And then you have anatomical variation in terms of how bones are shaped, where tendons are inserted, etc. And it's no surprise that people end up with, clicking and popping and stuff like that every now and then. It wouldn't necessarily be a big deal. So a lot of the time I'm not concerned about it. There is a difference between like just the clicking of a joint and some things like crepitus or fremitus. So crepitus being like if you're moving a joint and you're feeling and hearing the kind of sounds like a rough sound as the joint is moving. Like the reason that's sometimes of concern for people and people worry a lot about it is because that's one of the features of arthritis, is that if you feel an arthritic joint, that's what you'll feel. You won't have smooth movement. You'll have kind of rougher movement. There'll be clicking and cracking and stuff. But like what I say to people is that even if you do have that, right? So like my knees are like that. Like when I move my knees, I can feel and hear like cracks and pops and stuff. Even in the case of my knees, like if there are arthritic changes, or if there isn't, or if there are no arthritic changes, it doesn't change anything that I do, because whether or not there are those arthritic changes in the joint, it's like, okay, what would you do if there are, or what would you do if there aren't? And fundamentally, nothing changes for me. Like I'm still going to train. I still want to make sure I have strong muscles, that I'm exercising. Exercising is good for arthritis. So I'm not going to do anything different as a result of that. The problem is where people people maybe feel that cracking and crunching in a joint, and they get real concerned and change their activity and maybe train less or don't train their legs or whatever. That's where I become concerned about this stuff, because that's probably not a great idea at all, because you're basically coupling arthritic changes with less activity and or less functional capacity in terms of your muscle strength. And that's just a recipe for bad outcomes, So in general, if we're talking about like cracking, popping, crunching sound when you move your joints, that kind of crepitus, I'm not going to change anything as a result of that. With that said, if you do have those things, like in my knees, for example, as you follow people up over time, it does seem like you have a higher risk of developing osteoarthritis in future, which is something that people don't discuss, because I kind of see both sides of this argument, like where like some physios will say, oh, like, and I say this too, it's totally normal for joints to crack and pop and stuff. It's something you don't have to be concerned with at all. It doesn't matter. However, like it's not right to say it doesn't matter, because if joints are like crunching a lot when they're moving and you've got that crepitus, like, yes, when you look at future risk, there is a higher odds ratio of someone going on to develop osteoarthritis. So there is that, but it still doesn't change anything you do. So it's like, acknowledge there might be risk, but keep training. You know, it's one of those things.
Yeah.
You're going to say something there.
If there was a situation, for example, just a hypothetical, like, again, we'll use the elbow because that was the actual question, but again, it could be,
and that is different. I'm kind of on a tangent.
Or anything. But anyway, but for example, just say your elbow or your knee, there is one exercise that you do that makes it click, you know, like, say, for example, I don't know, just skull crushers, you know, and you're like, they always make my elbow click, but I can do press downs, I can do, you know, overhead extensions, I can do whatever. It just happens to be that if I'm doing like easy bar skull crushers, they're the ones, they make my elbow click. And would you, or again, could be, I don't know, the fucking leg press or back squat, front squats don't do it, you know, whatever the fuck. Could be just one specific exercise. It's not really even a specific movement pattern, we'll say. It's just the angle of the exercise, how your joints are like jammed in and that exercise, whatever the fuck is going on, right? Would you be of the opinion that we should just avoid that exercise then? Or, you know, maybe some sort of graded exposure, or like, how does someone deal with that? Again, if they have like one or two exercises, that's all that it does, and they can train those muscles, those joints in other just as effective ways.
Yeah, so like that is the real question. Like, I just wanted to get that kind of caveat out of the way. We'll do a full podcast on things like crepitus and joint sounds in general, but like I just wanted to make clear that there are differences in joint sounds. So like that crepitus is different to just like a single crack or a single pop or whatever, because in joints as well, you have to realize that sometimes when you move joints into particular positions, or at least we think that's the explanation, like for example in the spine and stuff, when you crack your back, that doesn't mean like that you're actually cracking anything. It just means that maybe there's a pocket of air in a joint or something like that is popping, or you're moving into a new space and stuff like that. And that's different to you could say arthritic joint surfaces, where you've got that crepitus feeling. And then that's different to what we're talking about here, which is just like a single click in the elbow when someone's moving or whatever, you know. So basically what I'm saying is that if you're having a click during a skull crusher, for example, in your elbow, that could be, you know, just a tendon there that's moving potentially. It could be bony surfaces. It could be so within the joint itself, or it could be just like a little pocket of air or something like that. Effectively, you don't know exactly what it is. But what I generally say to people, because even if it's not painful, it can still be disruptive, because you're like, I know that's coming, and it disrupts my ability to do the exercise, because it's just annoying when I hear that or when I feel that. So what I would say to people is you can modify a number of different things here. One of them being, for example, the specific grip you have in terms of radio ulnar joint position or wrist position. So what you could do is, if you do an overhand grip push down normally and you feel that, see if it changes when you do a neutral grip, see if it changes when you do an underhand grip, and then see if you can change the range of motion, for example. Because what you often find, which is quite interesting, is that these types of things, they might be present for a certain period of time, but then they just kind of go away without any other changes. Like, you seem to just be training away and it's just gone. And I think, like, there's obviously uncertainty baked into the cake here. But if you were in a period of time where like you're real fatigued and you're feeling tighter and stuff, your joints move differently. You know, if muscles are at different resting lengths and you have different levels of fatigue in different muscles pull to different degrees, and joints might move as a result differently. So you might have cracking during a period of time, or cracking or popping or something like that during a period of time in your workout, maybe where you're super fatigued, or during a period in your training block where you're super fatigued, and then it just kind of goes away. So what I would say is that trying to identify, is it a tendon? Is it because this muscle's firing differently, or figuring out specific muscle firing patterns or whatever? Like, you're just getting into unnecessary minutia that you're not going to be able to pin down there. But you can still play around with these variables of like where you're gripping, the range of motion that you're working with, and even things like intensity sometimes. So for example, if you might find that it's something that bothers you when you do 15 plus reps, but not when you do 6 to 8 reps, for example. And that might be because you're bracing differently, you're setting your joints differently when you do the movement. And it might just change the experience. So change your grip, change the range of motion, and play around with different exercises as well. Like, so for example, if it's a pressing variation, one of the variables you have at play is maybe it clicks when your elbows are out wide, but when you bring them in narrower, it no longer clicks. You could do that for a while and then go back to the movement again. Like you said, Paddy, graded exposure. So expose yourself to the movements that seem to be causing problems. Whether or not it's associated with pain is a different story. And then basically see if you can regain your tolerance for that again. With that said, that's basically the case if there's pain associated with it. But if you're having cracking that is associated with pain, then generally I would remove that movement short term, or maybe change the range of motion or something, and see if that's persistent over time. And if it was a case that every time someone moves their joint into a particular position, there's sharp pain associated with cracking, then I'd probably, that might warrant further investigation depending on the case. So that'd be my general thought process. Yep.
Nothing else to add to that. I think that answers it. And as you said, we are going to do some other podcasts and, you know, provide information in the Coach's Corner and on our website about different things such as, you know, creaking joints. So there is going to be more information on that stuff. And it's just not as big of a priority for us at the moment with all the other stuff that we have going on. So with that in mind, Gary, what is the other stuff that we have going on?
So we do have the Coach's Corner, as Paddy mentioned, which is our member site platform for personal trainers and interested trainees who want to level up, specifically personal trainers, because it's about more than just information. It's information with implementation, including practical resources, documentation, specific things you can use to get better results with your clients, etc. So if you are interested in that, you can subscribe to that and get involved. We also have we also have an online coaching service, if you didn't know, and we have spaces available. So if you'd like to work with us towards your own goals, you can do that as well. If you just want to get more involved with our community, our content, our recommendations, etc., you could subscribe to the newsletter, which goes out weekly, or you could join the Triage Method community on Facebook. And other than that, guys, you can just keep up with what we're doing by following us on Instagram, following us on Facebook. You can subscribe to our YouTube, and you can subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. It is available on multiple platforms. Now that Joe Rogan has moved to Spotify, more of you are probably using Spotify. I don't know if we have many Joe Rogan and Triage Method listeners, but Paddy likes to listen to his podcast on Spotify. And I've actually been doing that more recently as well. So if you do
all my podcasts on Spotify, you can listen to them in speed. It's unreal.
It is handy. And if you are on Spotify, you can subscribe to us there. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe to us on SoundCloud. SoundCloud doesn't even allow you to play in double speed. It's so weak. It's just single.
It literally is the weakest thing ever, but it's good because it hosts it as our RSS feed.
It does. Yes, it does host it. So thank you, SoundCloud. But yeah, leave a rating or review. We would appreciate that. And that's how you keep up with Triage.
Wonderful, Gary. I have nothing else to add. It is too easy.
It's too easy.